All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show, your one-stop shop for all things Commanders. It's an Inside the Command Center Friday, and our guest today is Al Galdi. Al, it's been a little bit. How have you been?
Doing well. Good to be back with you guys. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Al, I'm curious. I know you had Ryan Wetzel on the show the other day. I'm curious to see how that went, how the conversation went, and where you kind of stand on this feels like newly invigorated effort to bring a little history back.
Yeah. So, as you guys know, there's been a lot out there, and it's hard to figure out sometimes what's real, what's false, what's made up, what's actually true. So, I wanted to have Ryan on. He has not given many interviews. He's not been interviewed often.
No, he hasn't.
He's been a prominent name in the news for months now. So I just wanted to have a conversation with him about what exactly is happening. I mean, he's having conversations with the Commanders, and is the logo coming back actually a possibility? It was reported in the Washington Post in September that Wetzel had been told by the Commanders in the NFL that the logo really can't be brought back. We know that the name isn't coming back. The Josh Harris Group has said that publicly. The Harris Group, though, has never publicly said that the logo isn't coming back. Although, again, the Post did report that the Commanders and the NFL told Wetzel that the logo isn't coming back. So, we had that. Then we had all this stuff on social media over the last few weeks indicating not only that the logo might come back, I have seen people post on X that the logo is coming back. And I was like, wait a second. Yeah, that's not happening. That would have been a much bigger deal had it actually been happening.
Right. So
Ryan was great. Ryan, as many people know, he's the grandson of Walter Blackie Wetzel, who designed the logo. And Ryan is really cool guy, very informed. He obviously wants the logo brought back, but he's not one of these guys who's like, nasty towards those who don't want the logo back or isn't understanding of people who maybe don't think exactly as he thinks. This is a very meaningful thing to him because his family had so much to do with it. He does not see the logo as offensive. He also doesn't see the name as offensive, but that's a separate conversation. And he's been in conversations with the Commanders. And I asked him point blank, I said, is the logo coming back a possibility? And he said yes, although he said that, yeah, he was told by the Commanders in the NFL that it isn't being brought back, but he said he wasn't told why, and he felt like there was some wiggle room there. So I think what he's trying to do is figure out a way to maybe have the logo be brought back in some way, maybe not as the official logo of the team, but maybe it could be utilized in some other manner. I don't know how realistic.
You get three options for helmets, right? So maybe they could do like twice a year deal with as a throwback uniform.
Potentially, although I think that would maybe make people angrier because they'd be like, well, if it can be the logo twice a year, why can't it be the logo 17 times a year, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, to me,
do you think that's what scares the league? Is there's enough push that if they give you an inch, that people will want the full foot?
I think that's part of it. I also think, from an NFL perspective, I think the league is tired of all the problems with Washington. I think the league just wants Washington to not have any problems for a while. It's funny. I've seen people get mad at the Harris Group for the name issue and the logo issue. And I'm like, this is beyond their control. This is not about what Josh Harris wants. A lot of this is what he is about, what he is allowed to do. And he can't just bring back an old logo without the NFL being on board. Like, the NFL has to green light something like that. And if the NFL won't green light it, then Harris can't do it. It's as simple as that. So I think a lot of this is about that. And so I think there are these conversations happening. Ryan made it very clear. He's had very good conversations with the Commanders. They've been very cordial, and he's a big fan of the new front office. He's a fan of the team. He's been a fan of the team for years. It's not like he's someone who's not a fan of the team. So it was really interesting to hear him out. And I appreciate you bringing that up. And I certainly would encourage people to listen to our conversation.
Hey, Al, I missed the interview. Unfortunately, I will listen to the conversation upcoming. Was there a set timeline that Ryan kind of insinuated or kind of talked about when this is going to transpire or take place?
No. And, I think that's probably the smart way to do it, because
Absolutely.
We don't know what might be possible. We don't know what is forever impossible. And so to put like a hard deadline on things, my understanding, this has been intimated to me, is that the team is not going to do anything with the name/logo until this stadium thing is sorted out, because the team doesn't want to do anything that might upset any of these three jurisdictions, DC, Maryland, Virginia. So I think when the stadium thing gets finalized, then the focus will start to shift to the name and logo. But the stadium thing obviously is still up in the air, and we don't know exactly when that's going to be finalized. Could be in a few months. Maybe it's longer than that. We don't know. It's been going on for so long. I've given up trying to predict when that thing will get settled. So I think the way to look at it, if you're a fan, is stadium gets finalized, and then I think you can start to really be realistically expecting some sort of resolution on the name/logo.
We had planned on doing this later in the show, but you opened it up, so I'll just ask you about it. We've got Eric Flack coming on Monday to talk a little bit about the stadium and what's going on. Like we're now at the point where we're talking about fighter jets to get the stadium deal done. Like it feels like some kind of movie that we're living in here. Like there's two states. Well, I mean, technically DC's not a state, but there are two entities fighting now for what will be the stadium. Like if we've gotten to the point where we're talking about fighter jets, like what is it that we're doing here now?
Yeah, it's been such a wild saga. Obviously Ryan Wetzel was involved in this saga with what went on with Senator Steve Daines and him holding up the legislation in the Senate for a while. And the legislation still has not officially been passed by the Senate. Hopefully that's about to happen, but even that's not a guarantee. So, yeah, it's one of the more prolonged things we've ever had in DC sports. We first learned that Washington was looking at building a new stadium in August 2014. Dan Snyder gave an interview to Chick Hernandez with what was then CSN Mid-Atlantic. Right. That was August 2014. And Dan said, yeah, we're exploring a new stadium. Here we are now, more than a decade later. And it feels like we're not even that much closer to getting a new stadium. So this has been wild how long this has gone on. I don't think anyone ever expected it to take this long. Of course, I don't think anyone ever expected all the other things that happened with the franchise over the last decade to take place. So again, I think I've stopped trying to figure out when exactly this will go down. Clearly, this team is going to be at Northwest Stadium through the end of the current lease, if not beyond it. I think like 2027 at this point is really not that far away. So I think we have to accept that this team is going to be at Northwest for at least a few more years. And it's just a question of where does the team go beyond that? And, personally, I think that a new stadium in DC, Maryland, or Virginia could work. I'm not one of these DC or bus people. I'm not against a new stadium in DC, but I think this thing of like it has to be in DC, I don't think it has to be. I think it'd be nice if it was, but I think a new stadium in Maryland or Virginia could work just fine. The key is you get the right location, you build a proper structure, and you build up the area around it. And you can do that in a variety of areas. So, you want to get this right. You want to get, look, the team is looking for a good deal. Let's be honest about this. So I think that's a part of this as well. But yeah, this stadium thing has taken forever. It's taken so much longer than anyone ever thought.
Do you care whether it has a dome on it or not?
Well, it sounds like it's better off with a dome because that'll allow for more events to take place there. Now, I think a retractable roof would be ideal, but that costs a ton of money. So, who's going to pay for that? But ideally, you have a retractable roof so you can sort of have the best of both worlds. But I don't know how realistic that is.
I agree with that. Quick follow-up, Al. I don't know how much you deeply dive into the stadiums. One of the criticisms I heard about going back to RFK is the size of the lot. I think one of the appeals of FedEx, the actual structure isn't a great structure, but the fact they have parking lots allowing for tailgating is a benefit. Have you heard anything about the RFK Stadium and whether they could allow for that and there's enough space for all of that?
There's enough space for a stadium, and beyond that, not much more. I mean, for years, you guys probably remember this, for years, the talk was new stadium, but new stadium was short for new stadium, new team facility, maybe like a Washington football museum, retail. Yeah. It was going to be like this, Washington world that was created. And that talk has really calmed down to where now the widespread expectation seems to be that the team facility is going to stay in Ashburn. I mean, Josh Harris is putting some serious money into upgrading the team facility. You're probably not doing that if you're anticipating leaving there within the next few years. So it sounds like now they're going to stay in Ashburn in terms of the team facility. And when we talk about new stadium, we are literally talking about a new stadium and not much beyond that. But specific to the RFK Stadium land, if the Commanders get that, there's only enough room really for a stadium.
That's what I'm hearing.
And not much more. Yeah.
And that's crazy about Ashburn because that land's got to be worth a crap ton of money.
Yeah. It absolutely is. And, that facility, as most people know, it's not a very good facility as NFL
No,
facilities go. In fact, I think a lot of these college facilities are more impressive than the
Absolutely.
Commander's facility. Like
Absolutely.
a guy like Terry McLaurin who went to Ohio State, he probably had a better team facility in college than he has had
100%.
for at least most of his NFL career.
Here, Al, I'm going to ask you one more branding question. I'm going to say that you're not officially reporting. This is your opinion. I'm going to protect you on this question as well. Do you think that the team is potentially going to rebrand in the next couple of years in your own personal belief? Because like my theory is that the team is gaining so much popularity and Jaden Daniels has been so successful nationally. People equate the Washington Commanders with Jaden Daniels. Maybe locally they equate Commanders with Dan Snyder, but nationally Jaden Daniels is that popular figure. Would it be a disservice to change the name now, or do you dispel that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my theory has been this. One of the reasons that Josh Harris has not taken a public stance on the name and has been slow to really address it is that he wants to see if there's viability with Commanders. He's aware of so many people hating it, okay? And I understand anyone who's watching this or listening to this who despises that name, despises the way it was rolled out and unveiled.
Yeah.
I get it. Trust me, I do. But I think if you're Josh Harris, to say, okay, to go through yet another rebrand for this team would be costly, would be, I think, emotionally draining for a lot of people. And the thing is, there is no magic bullet new name.
that's it.
There never
Absolutely.
has been one. There never will be one. There is one name that you could go to that would satisfy a lot of people, but we have been told that that name cannot be gone back to. Whether you agree with that or not, that seems to be the reality. And so if you can't go back to that former name, then tell me the new name that's so much better. I'm not telling you that Commanders is some dream name, but tell me the name that's going to be so much better to where you get like universal acceptance or widespread acceptance. So I think if you're Josh Harris, who remember is a high-level business person, went to Wharton, went to Harvard Business School, he's saying, okay, let's see if there's viability with Commanders. We rebuild our football operations. We hopefully get a franchise quarterback. We're hopefully a good team again. Does that make it so that people take to Commanders? Or is that name just you can't move forward with it? Like it's a dead name. You got to get away from it. And I think we're in the process of finding out. We don't have access to the financial numbers that the Commanders have access to, but I'd love to know what their internal metrics are saying with the team doing so well, with Daniels being so good. Are they sensing that there is increasing acceptance of Commanders? Or again, is it just a name that ain't nobody going to be accepting on any kind of a widespread basis? And I think that's the big question, because to go through another rebrand, look, if you have to do it, you do it, but it's not cheap. There's not an obvious new name. And again, I mean, think about it. We'd be going to a fourth different name in less than a decade. Like, how many times are you going to change your name here? It becomes embarrassing at a certain point.
I agree 100%.
Embarrassing. And if Jaden gets Rookie of the Year, and if they go to the playoffs, and if they look good and they stay electric down the stretch, again, nationally, worldwide, like people in England that are just rooting for Jaden Daniels running like crazy and throwing the ball over the yard don't care that the name is the Commanders, right? Like they're going to buy the W hats and everything will be great. And you point out, and we can move on from this after this, but rebranding was expensive, like expensive with a capital E. And I can see why, if it's not necessary, why would you do that?
Yeah, you wouldn't. And yeah, I think that's the way they look at it. You see, I don't think it's about like what Harris personally thinks about Commanders or what Mitch Rails
I
personally
mean, the
thinks
basketball
about
team he
Commanders.
owns is called the 76ers, right? Like it's not some superstar name, and they never gonna fix it. So
I think this is about what is going to make the most business sense, what is going to work the most with the fan base. And I think that's what they're trying to figure out. They're aware of the dissatisfaction with Commanders, but is there increasing acceptance of it? Or is it a name that just is never going to work? And I think they're trying to figure that out. And, I think this offseason could be really interesting. I wonder if we do get a direction on that. I think we could. But again, there's no guarantee. So I'm not holding my breath. We'll see.
I'll throw one more at you. I'm sorry to keep going with it, Doug.
That's okay.
We hired Mark
No,
Klaus.
that's
We hired Mark Klaus, I suppose, the new rebranding marketer. People are kind of equating brand marketer automatically rebranding of the team. You don't necessarily see it that way in your perspective, right?
Not necessarily. I mean, it could be. I think if
Okay.
you're Josh Harris, what you do is you hire a new team president who would be adept at a good rebrand, if in fact you go in that direction.
Yeah.
I think it's very possible that Josh Harris doesn't know what he's going to do with the team name. And so if you're hiring a new team president, you say, okay, first of all,
figure it out.
what is your
Mhm.
vision for the name? But second of all,
Mhm.
if we did rebrand, what would your plan of execution be? So
Mm.
I think the smart thing to do is to hire someone who could do a rebrand in a great way. But I don't know that it necessarily says that a rebrand is coming. I mean, this guy is super impressive. By now, I think most people are familiar with the credentials. But you're getting
Mhm.
a top level executive from the business world. He's obviously not coming cheap. Military background, sports background, played basketball at Army. So this guy's got a lot going for him. And, he seems like someone who's smart and who could do a rebrand in a good way. Now, we'll see. Just because you're good at, running a soup company doesn't mean you're good at being a team president in the NFL. But this guy seems to be a pretty smart guy. And, I think Harris has earned the benefit of the doubt in terms of his judgment in hiring people here. He's made a lot of good hires so far. And hopefully this guy is the latest one.
Well, and to that point, like you're not bringing in they were going to always bring in a new team president. And just because the old team president's job was primarily focused around this change, like the new guy, like technically the new president's job is also to figure out who's going to pay to put their logo on the backdrop behind the coaches when they speak and who's going to, I mean, they've got the stadiums or, but the president for an average sports team is not concerned about a rebrand because they're not doing
Yeah.
that. So like this guy's job, to your point, is way bigger than whatever that is. And as far as if they did rebrand, you said it earlier, and I completely agree. If they do that, it would obviously be coinciding with a new stadium. I couldn't see why you wouldn't like just blow that whole thing together.
Yeah, I think ideally you would do that. I don't know if you can time it out perfectly like that, but I mean that if you could script it, that probably would be what you do. Now, if they can't open a new stadium till 2030 or something like that, I don't know that they're going to stick with a name that they don't believe in for another 5 6 years. But yeah, that would be a way to time it out. New stadium, new name, new era, etc. So we'll see.
And can you possibly change the name? Al? I'm just thinking that if they start winning, say they win a playoff game this year, and say they go like to the NFC Championship game next year. I mean, I know we're talking big things here, but like, could you be that successful as the Commanders, then all of a sudden just not be the Commanders anymore? To me, that's like the thing that we're not talking enough about is
I
if
agree.
this team keeps winning, how could you possibly change the name?
It would build up the case for Commanders. That is true. I mean, again, we don't know what the internal metrics are saying. Like maybe
That's
they
true.
would say, well, our revenues are X at Commanders, but with us doing so well, the revenues would be X, plus 50 if we were a different name. Like we don't know what they're thinking in that
Yeah.
regard. But to your point, yeah, I do think that there is a portion of the fan base that says it hates Commanders and truly does hate Commanders, but would come around to Commanders if the team was good again. I think a big part of this the last few years, it was the team being so bad. Now, that's not the only
I agree
thing,
with
but
that.
I think
I agree
that's
with that.
part of it. I think if the
Mhm.
team was better, there wouldn't be this vile reaction to that
Yeah.
name because look, the name stands for a lot of bad things. The rollout was bad, the unveiling was bad. It happened under Dan Snyder. We all know the reasons, but the team was bad these last few years, and I think that's a part of that. Now, would a lot of people come around to the name if the team was good again? Would only a small minority? Hard to say. I think there are some, but are there many? That's the question.
Al, thank you for humoring us, by the way. During our pre-planning, we had no idea we're going to talk about winning off the field for 20 minutes. I appreciate that. So let's transition to on the field performance. So obviously the team's looking pretty good this year. 8-5, started off 7-2 to start off the year. A surprise to most of us. I'm just kind of curious what surprises you most about the season. And I'm going to take away the option of Jaden Daniels. So what surprised you the most this year?
Well, I think there have been multiple pleasant surprises. And I think what
Mhm.
you've had is a lot of different things work out in the best possible way. I know I thought this. Like, you hoped the offensive line would be good. You saw a path by which the offensive line would be good. But I mean, I wasn't certain of that. Well, the offensive line has been good. With the linebackers, Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, you figured the team would be better at linebacker. You hoped that the team would be really good at linebacker, but of course, you couldn't be completely certain of that. Well, the team has been really good at linebacker, so that has worked out in a great way. The team, I think, has enjoyed really good health. I mean, there have been some injuries, yes.
We're
Jonathan Allen,
lucky with that.
Ryan Robinson
Mhm.
has been banged up, but by and large, you compare what the Commanders have gone through from an injury standpoint to other NFL teams. This has been a good injury luck season so far, knock on wood. So very happy about that. And then, I won't say Jaden Daniels, but I will talk about the Cliff Kingsbury, Jaden
Yeah,
Daniels marriage. We hoped it would be great. We thought that it could be great, but nobody could be certain that it would be great. It has been great. It has been as good as anyone could have reasonably
I
expected.
agree.
So
I agree.
a lot of things that you thought were possible, you hoped would happen, have in fact happened, and at almost like the highest possible level. And I think that's been so good. And I think that does speak to coaching. I think these coaches are getting the most out of this roster,
I
and I think
agree.
these guys deserve a lot of credit.
I agree.
It's been a long time since we've, and again, we try not to go backwards and, on the group, but it feels like when you watch this group of coaches and the general man, like the whole operation now, you can feel a difference now between the last group. And I won't get into why for the last group, but I think it's been refreshing to really see what a top rate organization with a coaching staff that has a philosophy and a plan moving forward, the difference it makes.
100%. And, it's funny because the opener did not go well. And I did not think that that was a good day for the coaching staff. And as you
Mm.
may remember, Cliff Kingsbury the following Thursday talked about how he gave off the worst play call of his life on a red zone call that resulted in a Jaden Daniels run. And so that regular season opener, you said to yourself, like, this didn't look like that much better of a coach team. But ever since then, it has been. Cliff has done a great job. I think Joe Witt Jr., look, the defense has plenty of issues, but I think he's working with a group that isn't that great from a talent standpoint. And I think he's getting decent production out of it. Not great, but I wouldn't say Witt's like doing a bad job. You can't say he's doing a great job, but I think he's doing pretty well. And Dan Quinn overall, we heard so much going into the season about Quinn as a culture builder, as a leader, as a guy who gets along with players, as a guy who players love to play for. And when you hear all this stuff, it's always like, okay, it all sounds great, but like, how true is it? And I think
Mhm.
we're seeing that it is legit. There's something about Quinn where he's great at connecting with people. People want to play for him, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. So I give these guys a ton of credit. It's funny looking back on some of the offseason narratives. Remember people going nuts over Bobby Johnson as the offensive line coach. How could
Yeah.
you hire Bobby Johnson as the
Yeah.
offensive line coach? He's doing a great job. Like
Yeah.
that's how you hire Bobby Johnson. He's doing a really good job. So it's been awesome to see, and we'll see where it all takes us.
This group is interesting to me because you always get coach speak and you're used to hearing that, and so then that's how you're trying to decipher what it all means. I remember like 3 weeks ago, Joe Witt Jr. in a press conference came out and said, "You know what? I made a mistake." And people were like, "Oh, okay, this ought to be interesting." He said, "I've been coaching this team like we're installing year 3 of the defense in Dallas, right? And we're not. We're installing year 1 of the Commanders defense." And I had to take a step back and say, this isn't Micah Parsons in year 3 of the Cowboys defense. Like, we're trying to get these guys up to speed now. And he said, I needed to take a step back and remember where we are in the process. And I thought it's really nice to like hear folks take accountability, but not, give it all away like we're used to hearing. And that was refreshing to me.
Yeah, I like Witt's press conferences. I enjoy hearing what he has to say. I think there is an honesty with what he says. I agree with you on that. He'll give you some stuff. Now he doesn't, over reveal, but like he'll pull the curtain back a little bit. I think that he's someone who very clearly earned this shot at being a defensive coordinator, did really good work as the defensive passing game coordinator and secondary coach for Dallas these last 3 years, had a really good run with the Green Bay Packers prior to that. So this is a guy who knows defense. You could argue was overqualified, like, maybe should have gotten a defensive coordinator job sooner. And we'll see how his tenure goes. I mean, he's got, we got to see more and better from this defense in the years to come. But for now, look, I don't think this is a defense that is oozing with talent. I don't. And I think that the defense has gotten better, speaks to Witt. The fact that a guy like a Mikey Sainristil is having such a good rookie season speaks to Witt. The fact that a guy like Johnny Newton is showing improvement speaks to Witt. Dante Fowler Jr. is having a maybe the best season of his career in terms of sacks. I think that helps to speak to Witt. So I think there are a lot of good things here, and that's good. And to me, it does start with the offense. I think Kingsbury's done an awesome job. I don't know that we're going to have him beyond this season. We'll see. But, we're seeing the best offense for Washington since at least 2015, 2016, maybe 2012. And that's a high compliment because, look, there haven't been many good offenses here in recent years. That's true. But those offenses were good 2012, 2015, 2016. What we're seeing this season is in that same company, if not better.
Al, I got a two-part question for you. So what are realistic expectations or a benchmark for Washington potentially going to the playoffs? Or do you see them reasonably competing with the Eagles and the Lions or competing with the Seahawks or whatever, what have you with that outcome over there? Part one. And then part two is, regardless of what happened, do you deem the season a success in your opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
they're ahead of schedule. They're a year ahead of schedule, at least, maybe multiple years ahead of schedule. And, all they have to do is go 2-2 over the final 4 regular season games. They get to 10 wins, which is, like, how many people were expecting that going into this season? So the season is a success. Now, look, if they, lost out, which I don't think they're going to do, but if they did, it would leave a bad taste in all of our mouths, right? I mean, nobody would be thrilled with that. But this season has been a success already. Another win or two, and it's a slam dunk smashing success. When it comes to the postseason, I mean, we've seen how unpredictable it can be, so I don't put anything past them. But if they were to be one and done in the playoffs, it would be really hard to be mad about that.
Yeah.
Again, who knows what might happen if they won a game? Forget about it. We'd be on fire, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think you can be upset if they go to the playoffs, and even if they got blown out. I mean, they make the postseason in year one of the rebuild / recalibration. Like, come on, it's a total house money game. It's not unlike when Washington faced Tampa Bay in the postseason in the first year, Ron Rivera. Like, that was a house money game in a lot of ways. And yeah, the fact that they could do that is still pretty jaw dropping. And that's why, like, we were all mad about the loss to the Cowboys, right? But that's really the only bad loss this team has. Like, to be 8-5 with 4 of the 5 losses being quote unquote like understandable, acceptable losses. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in that. And again, year one of a rebuild.
Rivera literally said making the playoff game was bad for business because it put him too far. I bet you we don't hear Dan Quinn or Adam Peters say that. Speaking of Adam Peters, the man has made seemingly no mistakes this year. I mean, to your point, getting Dante Fowler and having him look like the guy that got drafted in the first round is just amazing. Peters is also doing other interesting things. I think when he first signed Lattimore, people got excited, like, here we go, where somebody's lining us up for a playoff push. And I think we come to find out that that was a checker move that we've all been used to. Like, that would be a Bruce Allen move if he was signing this man just so they could try to get to the playoffs. Quite obviously, letting him rest up and get healthy. This was a move for the long term. Like, they plan on him getting every bit of this contract and hopefully more. It's been fun to kind of see what a front office can look like.
For sure. I mean, it's the first traditional general manager head coach setup for Washington since Charlie Casserly was the general manager, and his tenure as GM ended in
My beard had a
1999.
lot more color in it back then, Al.
Yeah, like, it's amazing it took the team this long to get back to that traditional structure of general manager in charge of football operations, head coach beneath the GM. The team had not had that since the late 90s with Casserly and Norv Turner. It's unbelievable when you think about that. So to have that is great. Peters was obviously the number one front office candidate this past offseason. That Josh Harris grabbed him quickly says a lot to how prepared Harris was for this revamping of football operations. And, with the caveat of it takes multiple years to evaluate things, as things stand right now, how do you not love the offseason that Peters had, whether you're talking about free agency or the draft? He knows the kind of player who he wants. He's identifying those guys. He's getting those guys. And, I know we've all gone nuts over how bad the drafting turned out to be over these last few years with now Jamin Davis and Emmanuel Forbes Jr. gone. But, there is a moxie to what Peters is doing. There is a chutzpah to what Peters is doing, to where he's not afraid to cut these guys. This team knows what it wants, knows what it does not want. And if you don't fit that, you're gone. And it's as simple as that. It doesn't matter where you were drafted. Like, they're operating in a bold way. They are operating with conviction. They know the kind of team they are trying to put together. One of the things with Ron was that he changed his outlook. He changed the way he described what the team was trying to do. It was like they never really figured out who and what they wanted to be. It's very clear with Peters and Quinn. They know what they want this team to be. They know the kind of player who they want on this team. And if you're not that kind of player, then you're gone. I should have mentioned Jahan Dotson. That's another example of that, him being traded away. So
they traded that man because he couldn't block good enough. Like,
right.
I mean, literally.
It's
telling. They
telling.
need wide receivers. It's funny, hilarious.
So, yeah, I mean, the number one acquisition of the year has to be Jaden Daniels. But if you told me it's Adam Peters, I'm not going to disagree with you. Peters is giving this team something it has not had in forever, and that's high-level head of player personnel work, which is just, of course, critical in the NFL.
Let's get you out of here on this one now. What has surprised you most about Jaden Daniels?
The fact that so you never know with a quarterback. He can do one way in college, but until he gets to the NFL, you don't know if he is going to identify things quickly and correctly enough. And that to me, that's the number one thing that gets all these collegiate quarterbacks in trouble. In college, the game is slower, it's simpler. One of the things you just don't know is when a guy comes to the NFL, because to me, the number one thing a quarterback does is you got to process. So you have to identify what you should do, and you have to do that quickly. And if you don't do those two things well, accurately and quickly in terms of identifying what to do once you take the snap, forget it. You have no chance. Daniels has been outstanding in those regards. And we all hoped that he would be in that way, but you couldn't be 100% sure because he had never played in an NFL game. This guy's football IQ is to the moon. This guy knows the game so well. He's outstanding at reading defenses. His behavior post-snap is really, really good. Now, I know, like, if you break down the all-22, you're always going to find some plays on which he should have done this instead of doing that. But you can do that with every quarterback. For a rookie, this guy's ability to make decisions quickly and correctly is so impressive. And, of course, then everything else comes into the mix. His accuracy, his speed, his arm strength, which has not been an issue at all. I mean, is it elite arm strength? Maybe not, but he can make all the throws. That's what matters the most. Man, like when you have a quarterback whose mind is at a high level, that's when you can really do well. And I think that's the number one reason that he and this team are doing well, because this guy's football IQ is in a way that allows him to play in a spectacular manner. I mean, he's having one of the best quarterback seasons, not just by a rookie this franchise has ever seen, but any quarterbacking season, period. Like, if you go by some of the advanced numbers, he's right up there with some of the great quarterbacking seasons anyone has ever had with this team. We'll see what happens these final 4 games, but I don't think you can say enough good things about the guy.
And I know you had Nick Ackridge on the other day. It's a lot of the things that people were worried about before the season started, like pressure to sack ratio, like zilcho.
100%. I mean, look, I talked about the pressure to sack rate thing a lot because historically speaking, that sticks. Like, it's something, and we just went through this with Sam Howell. He was a massive concern with pressure to sack rate. I think a lot of us sort of said, all right, whatever. It wasn't a whatever. Like, that was a real issue for him. With Daniels, it has not been an issue. His pressure to sack rate this season is better than it was in college. How many guys improve like that in the NFL? The NFL is harder than college, and he's better at this in the NFL than he was in college. I mean, again, football acumen, football IQ, just cannot heap enough praise on Daniels for that. And just keep it going, man. He has been phenomenal. Could have never expected him to be this good, even if you wanted Daniels all along. I don't think you're being honest if you say you expected this.
I agree with that.
Play at this level.
I agree with that.
Al, I sat here and done this for 2 hours with you. We appreciate your time today, always. Every day, Monday through Friday. By when you're up early, you got the breakfast show.
Yeah, out by 5 a.m. Eastern. So wherever you are, you know that you can wake up. We talk Commanders on every episode. Lots of good guests. And if you're into DC's other teams like the Nationals and Capitals, and God help you, the Wizards, but we do talk Wizards, but we cover a lot of ground. So I appreciate that.
If the Commanders can be good again, I have hope for the Wizards one day.
Yeah. Although, the Bullets/Wizards, they haven't been good truly since the late 70s. At least with the Skins, you can go back to the early 90s. With the Wizards Bullets, you got to go back almost 50 years at this point, which is incredible when you think about it.
Amazing.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate you, buddy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bye, guys.